How do you tell the Korean mafia boss who won't let you go that you're already engaged to someone else? I saved his life in a traditional village shortcut, thinking we'd never meet again. But the mafia king doesn't take no for an answer, especially when he's decided. I'm the only woman fit to be his queen. Jennifer Nsubuga was never someone who did things halfway. A brilliant young doctor from the vibrant streets of Kampala, Uganda. She had moved to South Korea to join the prestigious medical team at Asan Medical Center in Seoul. Driven by a relentless desire to heal, she had quickly adapted to the fast-paced life of the city, though she kept her Ugandan roots close to her heart. The fluorescent lights of Asan Medical Center flickered as the emergency task force gathered. A cluster of unexplained respiratory cases had emerged from the remote, fog-shrouded village of Goksong. The symptoms were aggressive, acute pulmonary edema, rapid onset hypoxia, and a mysterious resistance to standard antivirals. Jennifer Nsubuga sat at the mahogany table, her tablet glowing with chest X-rays showing ground glass opacities. As an infectious disease specialist, she was the first choice for the rural research team. A 90-day longitudinal study to isolate the pathogen and contain the transmission. The medical team traveled via a specialized mobile clinic, heavy-duty bus outfitted with a portable biosafety lab. As they wound through the steep emerald mountains of the Korean countryside, the air grew thick and cool. They were stationed in the Old Hanok Quarters, a repurposed traditional complex, while the exterior boasted ancient wooden beams and tiled roofs. The interior had been converted into a high-tech dormitory. Each doctor had a minimalist at Effitel-style room with a heated ondel floor, a small workstation for logging vitals, and a sterile decontamination zone at the entrance. Their days were grueling. Jennifer spent hours in Level 3 PPE, performing Bronzia velar lavage on patients and running PCR assays to track the viral load. The work was clinical, exhausting, and isolated. After 4 weeks of staring at Petri dishes and intubating patients, the team lead declared a mandatory mental health Saturday. The doctors traded their scrubs for civilian clothes and headed to a small, lively tavern at the edge of the village to celebrate a breakthrough in their data. For a few hours, Jennifer felt like a normal 20-something again. She laughed with her colleagues over soju and spicy tteokbokki. The weight of the outbreak momentarily lifted. Around midnight, refusing a ride to stay and enjoy the crisp night air, Jennifer began the 20-minute walk back to the quarters. She was taking a shortcut through a narrow stone-walled alleyway when the scent hit her. It wasn't the mountain pine or the evening mist. It was the metallic, unmistakable smell of massive hemorrhaging. Propped against a weathered wooden gate was a man. His white silk shirt was shredded, stained a deep, visceral crimson. This was Kang Ha-joon. Though Jennifer didn't know his name yet, she only saw a man in hypovolemic shock. "Sir, can you hear me?" Jennifer dropped to her knees, immediately clicking open the trauma kit she always carried in her tote bag. She performed a rapid primary survey. He had a deep, penetrating wound to the left upper quadrant of his abdomen, likely a knife. His skin was cold and clammy. His pupils were sluggish. "Stay with me," she commanded. her voice switching into doctor mode. She grabbed a hemostatic dressing, shoving it into the wound to pack the arterial bleed. Suddenly, Ha-joon's body went rigid. His chest hitched, but no air followed. He was experiencing laryngospasm. His throat was closing. "He's crashing," she whispered to herself. His pulse became thready, then vanished. He went limp, his head falling back against the stones. He was in full respiratory arrest. With no bag valve mask available and seconds ticking toward brain death, Jennifer didn't hesitate. She tilted his head back to clear the airway, pinched his nose, and pressed her lips to his. She forced her own breath into his lungs, her eyes locked on his chest to watch for the rise and fall. One breath, two. On the third breath, Ha-joon's hand suddenly shot up, his fingers locking around Jennifer's wrist like a vice. His eyes snapped open, piercing, obsidian, and filled with a terrifying intensity. He wasn't just breathing. He was staring into the soul of the woman who had just pulled him back from the gates of hell. In that dark alley, amidst the smell of blood and rain, the doctor and the devil were bound together by a single shared breath. She thought she was fulfilling her oath, but she just signed a contract with the most dangerous man in Korea. What would you do if you were Jennifer? Tell me in the comments, and stay tuned. What coming next will keep you on your feet. Also, tell us in the comments section where you're watching us from so we can greet you in our next video. The silence of the alleyway was thick, broken only by the ragged, synchronized breathing of two people who should have never met. Jennifer's wrist was still pinned in Ha-joon's iron grip. His eyes, dark as a winter midnight, didn't flicker toward his wound or the blood-stained pavement. They were anchored on hers. His voice was a gravelly rasp, barely a vibration against the night air. He didn't ask who she was or how he got there. Instead, he uttered 4 words that felt like a sentence. Jennifer's heart hammered against her ribs, a rapid, tachycardic rhythm that she couldn't control. For a professional who had dealt with life and death situations in the ER, this was different. This wasn't just adrenaline, it was an electric, terrifying connection. "Sir, you're delirious. You have a perforated abdominal wall and you've lost a significant amount of blood," she replied, her voice trembling but her medical authority holding firm. "I need to get you to the village clinic, now." Ha-joon's grip tightened. A ghostly, dangerous smile touched his pale lips. "No hospital," he whispered, his eyes narrowing. "If you take me there, the ones who did this will find me. I won't come out alive. Let me go." He tried to stand, but his body betrayed him. His blood pressure was bottoming out, and as he tilted forward, Jennifer caught him. His heavy frame slumped against her, his head resting on her shoulder. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the copper tongue of blood filled her senses. She couldn't leave him to die. Risking her career and her safety, Jennifer guided the semi-conscious boss back to the old Honic quarters. She avoided the main paths, dragging him through the shadows and into her private dormitory through the side entrance. Once inside her sterile, minimalist quarters, she laid him on the ondel floor. Under the bright white LED lights, the severity of his status was clear. She worked with clinical precision. She used lidocaine to numb the area, then carefully debrided the wound. Every time the needle pierced his skin for the sutures, she felt his body flinch, but he never made a sound. Throughout the night, Jennifer sat by his side, monitoring his oxygen saturation and pulse. In the quiet hours of 3 a.m., the fear began to fade, replaced by an intense curiosity. She watched the way his tattoos, dark, intricate dragons, intertwined with the scars of his past. For a moment, she reached out to brush a stray lock of hair from his forehead. His skin was burning with a slight fever. At that touch, his eyes opened for a split second, not with the coldness of a killer, but with a raw, soul-bearing vulnerability that made her breath hitch. As the first light of dawn filtered through the paper-thin Hanji windows, Jennifer drifted into a light sleep, sitting upright in her chair. She was jolted awake by the sound of a heavy door closing and the distant rumble of a black SUV engine. She scrambled to the floor where her patient had been, but the space was empty. The blood-stained towels had been neatly piled and the floor had been wiped clean. The only evidence he had ever been there was a small, heavy gold signet ring left on her bedside table, pinned to a scrap of paper. She picked it up, her fingers shaking. The note was written in elegant, sharp Korean script, but at the bottom, in English, was a message that felt like a vow. "I am not finished with you, doctor. I will come back for you." Jennifer stood in the center of her room, the silence now deafening. Her heart, which should have been relieved that the danger was gone, felt a strange, aching void. The king of Seoul had vanished into the morning mist, but he had left a permanent scar on her soul, and she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that her quiet life in the village was over. For 2 weeks, Jennifer lived in a state of self-imposed denial. She buried herself in her research, analyzing pathogen virulence and documenting the epidemiological curve of the village outbreak. Whenever the memory of that night, the metallic scent of blood, the desperate mouth to mouth, and those piercing obsidian eyes threatened to surface, she looked at the silver ring on her left hand. She was engaged to David. They had a history. They had a plan. To her, the man in the alley was just a medical anomaly, a patient who had survived against the odds. She convinced herself that his parting vow was nothing more than a byproduct of post-traumatic delirium. The sun was dipping below the granite peaks of the mountains, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. Jennifer was walking back from the mobile clinic, her stethoscope still draped around her neck, when she saw a figure standing by a sleek, midnight black sedan at the edge of the road. As she drew closer, her pace slowed. The man was leaning against the car, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that screamed power and silent wealth. Even from a distance, the aura he radiated was heavy, dominant. Her heart began to perform a strange, erratic arrhythmia. Her chest felt tight, a physical reaction she couldn't explain away with logic. As the distance closed, the blurred memory of the alleyway snapped into sharp, high-definition focus. It was him. But he wasn't the dying, pale shadow she had stitched back together. This version of Kang Ha-joon was lethal in his perfection. His skin was healthy, his posture commanding, and his eyes. They were fixed on her with the predatory patience of a tiger. Ha-joon stepped forward, cutting off her path. The air between them seemed to ionize. "You look tired, doctor," he said, his voice no longer a rasp, but a deep, smooth velvet. A woman who saves lives deserves a meal that doesn't come from a plastic convenience store tray. Join me for dinner. Jennifer felt the heat rise to her cheeks, a mixture of irritation and an undeniable, visceral attraction. She adjusted her medical bag, using it like a shield. "What I did for you was part of my Hippocratic oath," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite the drumming in her ears. "I am a doctor. I save people. I don't do it for rewards. And I certainly don't do it to go on dates with strangers." Ha-joon tilted his head, a small, dangerous smirk playing on his lips. "I am not a stranger. Our lungs have shared the same air." "I have a fiancé," she blurted out, holding up her left hand so the silver band caught the dying light. "I am a committed woman. Please do not come here again." She brushed past him, her heart thundering so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She didn't look back, but she felt his gaze like a brand on her shoulders until she disappeared into the Hanik quarters. Ha-joon watched her go, his eyes cold and calculating. He didn't like the word no, and he despised the word fiancé. Back in the back seat of his car, he didn't call his doctors or his lieutenants. He called his head of intelligence. "I want everything," he commanded. "The man Jennifer and Nsubuga is promised to. I want his name, his bank statements, his vices, and his location. Find the crack in his foundation." Within 48 hours, a thick folder landed on Ha-joon's desk. As he flipped through the pages, a cold, satisfied smile spread across his face. Target: David's surname. Location: Kampala, Seoul. The weakness: high-stakes sports betting and a mounting debt to a local predatory lender. David wasn't a saint. He was a man drowning in a sea of his own poor choices, keeping it all hidden from the perfect Jennifer. Ha-joon leaned back, tapping a gold pen against the file. He didn't need to kill the man. He just needed to pull the thread that would unravel the engagement. If Jennifer wanted a man of honor, she would soon realize her fiancé had none, and the dangerous stranger was the one holding the shears to cut her free. "You think a ring can stop me?" Ha-joon whispered to the empty room. "I've survived bullets, doctor. I can certainly survive a rival who's already defeated himself." Despite being the most feared man in the Seoul underworld, Kang Ha-joon had realized one thing: bullets and blades couldn't win over Dr. Jennifer Nsubuga. If he wanted her heart, he had to play a different, much more chaotic game. He became a master of the strategic crises. One Tuesday, Jennifer was jolted awake by her phone vibrating violently on her nightstand. She saw the caller ID, private number she had begrudgingly saved. When she answered, she didn't hear the smooth, confident voice of a boss. Instead, she heard a ragged, shivering gasp. "Jennifer, please, it's happening again. I can't breathe." Jennifer's medical instincts bypassed her brain. "Ha-joon? Is it a laryngospasm? Are you having a pulmonary embolism?" There was only a weak groan in response. Terrified that the man she had saved was dying on her watch, Jennifer threw a coat over her pajamas, grabbed her trauma bag, and sprinted 3 blocks to the luxury villa where he was staying. She burst through the front doors, bypassing his startled security team, and kicked open his bedroom door. "Ha-joon, where is the pain? Scale of 1, 2. She stopped dead. Ha-joon was propped up against silk pillows, wearing a pristine robe, holding a glass of vintage red wine and watching a documentary on African wildlife. He looked remarkably healthy. "You're late," he said, checking his watch with a smirk. "It took you 11 minutes. We need to work on your response time, doctor." You lied," Jennifer yelled, her chest heaving from the sprint. "I thought you were in respiratory distress." "I was," he said smoothly, patting the spot on the bed next to him. "Distress because I haven't seen you in 48 hours. My heart rate was dangerously low from boredom. Sit, have some wine." Jennifer threw a roll of medical tape at his head and stormed out, swearing in Luganda the whole way down the hall. A few days later, Jennifer was deep in a dreamless sleep when a thunderous pounding echoed through her apartment door. She stumbled to the door, squinting at the clock. 6:01 a.m. "Who is dying now?" she muttered, swinging the door open. Before she could blink, a wall of charcoal-scented wool and pure muscle slammed into her. Ha-joon didn't say a word. He simply wrapped his arms around her in a vice-like grip, burying his face in the crook of her neck. "Ha-joon, what are you doing? Let go." "I had a nightmare," he mumbled, his voice sounding uncharacteristically small. "I dreamt you went back to Uganda and I couldn't find the coordinates. I woke up and my cortisol levels were through the roof. I needed a physical checkup." Jennifer tried to push him back, but it was like trying to move a mountain. "This is not how you check your health. You are a grown man. You are a mafia boss." "Even bosses get scared of the dark," he whispered, tightening his hold for just a second longer than necessary before releasing her. He looked down at her messy hair and mismatched socks, his eyes softening with a genuine heat that made Jennifer's heart skip a beat she strictly told herself was just frustration. While he played these dramatic games to stay in her orbit, Ha-joon was a shark beneath the surface. He was playing the long game. Every time Jennifer pushed him away, citing her loyalty to David, Ha-joon's men were sending him fresh updates. He now had photos of David at an underground casino in Seoul, the very same David who had told Jennifer he was working late at the office. Ha-joon watched Jennifer from a distance as she walked into the hospital, her head held high, unaware that her safe life was built on a foundation of sand. He could have told her then, but he knew Jennifer. She was stubborn. If he told her, she would think he was lying to win her over. "No," Ha-joon murmured, watching a video feed of David losing another 50 million won. "She needs to see the truth with her own eyes, and when her world falls apart, I'll be the only one there to catch her." He wasn't just waiting for a moment. He was orchestrating a collision. A twist of love was coming. One where the doctor would realize that the dangerous man was the only one who never lied to her. The neon lights of the Gangnam district blurred into streaks of blue and red as Jennifer sat in the back of Ha-joon's obsidian black sedan. She was fuming. He had intercepted her leaving the hospital, claiming he had vital information regarding a public health risk. "Ha-joon, if this is another one of your nightmares or heart palpitations, I am reporting you for harassment," Jennifer snapped, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "No games tonight, Jennifer," Ha-joon said, his voice unusually cold and devoid of his usual playful flirtation. He looked straight ahead. "I told you I would protect you. Sometimes protection looks like a wound. The car pulled up to a nondescript high-end private club. Ha-joon led her through a side entrance, his security detail clearing the path with silent, terrifying efficiency. He brought her to a darkened VIP observation room with a one-way glass window looking down onto a private baccarat table. "Look," he commanded softly. Jennifer leaned against the glass, her breath hitched. There, sitting at a table littered with empty whiskey glasses and debt markers, was David. He didn't look like the sweet, hard-working man she had planned to marry. His tie was loose, his face was flushed with a manic greed, and he was laughing as he pushed a massive stack of chips into the center of the table. "He told me he was at a medical seminar in Incan," Jennifer whispered, her voice trembling. "He said he was working overtime to save for our wedding house." "He's been here every night for 3 weeks," Ha-joon said, standing behind her, his presence a solid, grounding weight. "He didn't just spend his money, Jennifer. He spent the tuition money your parents sent from Uganda. And when that ran out, he started borrowing from people far more dangerous than me." The door to the gambling suite below burst open. Ha-joon's men entered not with guns, but with documents. Jennifer watched as David's face drained of color. He looked up toward the glass, unable to see her, but sensing the eyes of the man who owned his debt. "He's a pathological gambler," Jennifer Ha-joon explained, his hand hovering just inches from her shoulder, offering support without forcing it. "In medical terms, he has a dopamine dysregulation that has turned him into a liar. I bought his debt this morning. I own him now." Jennifer felt a wave of nausea hit her. It was a physical reaction, the feeling of her entire future evaporating in a single moment. The man she loved was a stranger. The life she built was a lie. Jennifer stumbled out of the club, the cool night air hitting her face like a slap. She didn't cry. She was in shock. Her mind was racing, trying to perform a psychological triage on her own life. Ha-joon didn't try to kiss her. He didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, he did something she didn't expect. He took off his heavy overcoat and wrapped it around her shivering shoulders. He walked her back to the car and told his driver to just drive. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small. "Nowhere," Ha-joon replied. "You've spent your whole life running to save others, doctor. For the next hour, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to be a doctor, or a fiancé, or a researcher. You can just be." For the first time, Jennifer didn't push him away. She leaned her head against the cool leather of the seat, and as the tears finally began to fall, she felt Ha-joon's hand find hers. He didn't squeeze it. He just held it steady. He didn't pressure her to break the engagement. He knew she was smart enough to do that herself. He'd already arranged for her parents' money to be recovered and sent back to Uganda anonymously. He stayed silent, giving her the one thing David never could, the truth. As the car glided through the quiet streets of Seoul, Jennifer looked at the man beside her. He was a monster to the world, a mafia king with blood on his hands. But tonight, in her darkest hour, he was the only thing that felt like home. The twist of love wasn't a spark. It was a slow-burning realization that the man who saved her soul was the one she had originally saved in the mud. The drive back to the Hanok village was silent, but the air inside the car had shifted. It was no longer the heavy tension of a predator and prey, but the somber stillness of a vigil. When the car pulled up to Jennifer's quarters, Ha-joon opened her door, his presence steady as a rock in a storm. As he turned to leave her at the threshold, Jennifer reached out, her fingers catching the sleeve of his charcoal suit. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, I can't be alone with my thoughts tonight." Ha-joon paused, his silhouette tall and imposing against the moonlight. Without a word, he stepped inside. The king of Seoul didn't call his guards or check his phone. He simply took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, revealing the intricate ink on his forearms, and took over. Since Ha-joon's skills were better suited for dismantling empires than kitchens, he ordered an array of comfort food from the only high-end place open. When the food arrived, the table was filled with steaming bowls of gomtang beef bone soup and Ugandan-style braised greens he had specially sourced. Jennifer sat motionless, her eyes red-rimmed. "I'm not hungry, Ha-joon. My stomach feels like it's in a knot." "Eat," he said, his voice low and firm. He didn't hover. He sat across from her and pushed a spoon into her hand. "Your body is in emotional shock. If you don't provide it with glucose and warmth, you'll crash. I didn't save you from a nightmare just to let you faint from malnutrition." Slowly, with his quiet encouragement, she began to eat. Between bites, the question that had been burning in her chest finally surfaced. Ha-joon put his chopsticks down. The playful, dramatic mask he usually wore was completely gone. He leaned forward, and for a moment, Jennifer felt her pulse skyrocket. The connection between them felt like an invisible thread pulled taut. "Because," he started, his voice a calm, deep vibration that seemed to settle the chaos in her soul. "When I was dying in that alley, I saw 1,000 faces of people who wanted me dead for power. Then I saw yours. You didn't want my money. You didn't know my name. You just gave me your breath because you believed my life had value." He reached across the table, his thumb grazing her knuckles. "In my world, loyalty is bought, but you are a light I don't deserve, but one I refuse to lose. I didn't expose David to hurt you. I did it because a lioness shouldn't be tied to a parasite." Jennifer felt a surge of heat in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the realization that this dangerous man understood her better than the man she had promised to marry. His honesty was brutal, but it was the only thing holding her together. By dawn, Jennifer's resolve had hardened. She had undergone a mental debridement, cutting away the dead parts of her past to save her future. She'd changed into her professional clothes, her face a mask of cold determination. She didn't let Ha-joon come inside with her, but he insisted on driving her to the apartment she shared with David. "I'll be right here," he said, tapping the steering wheel. "One word, and I'll end this." "No," Jennifer said firmly. "This is my life. I have to finish it." She walked into the apartment. David was there, looking disheveled, smelling of stale smoke and desperation. He tried to rush to her, a lie already forming on his lips. "Jenny, I was so worried I stayed up all night." "Stop, David." Jennifer's voice was like ice. "I was at the Golden Dragon last night. I saw the baccarat table. I saw the debt markers." David froze. The color drained from his face, replaced by a defensive, ugly sneer. "Who told you?" Was it that Korean guy? He's a criminal, Jennifer. You're going to believe a thug over your own fiancés? I believed my own eyes, she replied, sliding the silver engagement ring off her finger and placing it on the coffee table. The engagement is over. I've already called my parents. The money you took from them, consider it the price of your freedom, because if I ever see you again, I won't be the one handling you. The thug you mentioned is much less patient than I am. David didn't take it lightly. He began to shout, pleading one moment and blaming her the next for never being home because of her medical work. But as he stepped toward her aggressively, he looked out the window and saw the black SUV idling at the curb, with Ha-joon leaning against the door, watching the window with a lethal, unblinking stare. David stopped mid-sentence. The sheer terror of Ha-joon's presence took the wind out of his sails. He realized he hadn't just lost a fiancé, he had lost his shield. Jennifer walked out of the apartment without looking back. As she reached the car, the heavy door opened for her. She climbed in, and as the city of Seoul began to wake up, she let out a breath she felt she had been holding for years. Is it done? Ha-joon asked softly. It's done, she said, leaning her head back. Now take me to the hospital. I have lives to save. Ha-joon smiled, a real, rare smile. That's my doctor. The 2-week countdown to the end of the research mission had begun. The atmosphere in the village was lighter as the outbreak was finally under control. But for Jennifer, the air felt heavier than ever. She was in the middle of a post-war debrief, her mind sharp with clinical data, when a sudden silence fell over the hospital hallway. The heavy double doors of the rural clinic swung open, and the rhythmic clicking of polished leather shoes echoed against the linoleum. Kang Ha-joon didn't sneak in. He arrived like a storm. He was holding a massive, breathtaking bouquet of sabe, star flowers, the desert rose of East Africa, a rare and intentional nod to Jennifer's Ugandan heritage. He looked strikingly handsome in a tailored navy suit, but his eyes were fixed solely on Jennifer. The nurses whispered, their heart rates likely spiking at the sight of the legendary, dangerous man standing in their humble lobby. Jennifer's heart performed a violent, premature ventricular contraction, PVC, a skipped beat that sent a flutter through her throat. She didn't look at the flowers. She looked at him, and her face was a mask of professional granite. Without a word, Ha-joon stepped toward her, offering the lunch invitation with the tilt of his head. Jennifer didn't decline out loud. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. The contact was electric. His skin was warm, his grip firm, but Jennifer's hand was steady, the hand of a surgeon about to make a necessary cut. She led him through the lobby, past the staring staff, and out onto the hospital compound. They stopped beneath a large weeping willow at the edge of the gardens. The tension in the air was so thick it felt like a physical weight, a constriction of the chest that made it hard to find a full breath. Jennifer turned to face him, letting go of his hand. She didn't look away. Ha-joon, she began, her voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of a final diagnosis. I'm grateful for what you did. You showed me a truth I was too blind to see, and you protected me when I was at my weakest. I will never forget that. She took a step back, creating a deliberate physical boundary. But I am a doctor. My life is built on order, on healing, and on quiet service. Your world is built on shadows and drama that I cannot coexist with. At this point, I don't need a savior, and I don't need a king. I need to be Jennifer Nsubuga again." She looked him directly in the eye, her voice hardening. "I am asking you respectfully to stay away from my life. Let me finish my work and return to Seoul in peace. Do not follow me again. This is the only way I can breathe." The silence that followed was deafening. The wind rustled the willow branches, but Ha-joon remained motionless. For the first time since she had met him, the Mafia king looked genuinely struck. It wasn't anger, it was a profound, silent shock. His jaw tightened, a small muscle leaping in his cheek. For Ha-joon, the words felt like a cardiac arrest. He had spent weeks orchestrating her world, protecting her, and pursuing her with everything he had, only to be told that his very existence was the drama she couldn't tolerate. He looked down at the African flowers in his hand, flowers he had gone to great lengths to find, and realized they were a bridge to a land he could never truly enter. He didn't argue. He didn't use his power to demand she stay. He simply looked at her, his dark eyes swirling with the mixture of pain and a cold, tragic understanding. "I understand, doctor," he said, his voice barely a whisper, devoid of its usual command. He didn't hand her the flowers. He placed them gently on a stone bench between them, turned on his heel, and walked toward the idling SUV. He didn't look back. As the car sped away, leaving a cloud of dust on the village road, Jennifer stood alone in the garden. Her pulse was finally slowing down to a normal sinus rhythm, but her soul felt strangely, terrifyingly hollow. The man she saved was gone, and for the first time, the peace she had asked for felt like a heavy, silent cage. The final night in the village was thick with the scent of rain and mountain pine. Inside her quarters, Jennifer was surrounded by half-packed suitcases and medical journals. Her mind focused on the logistical transfer of patient files back to the capital. She was leaving at 6 a.m., and she had spent the last 2 weeks convinced she had successfully severed the cord between her world and Ha-joon's. Then came the knock. It wasn't the rhythmic, heavy pounding of his guards, but a single, sharp, and impatient sound. When Jennifer opened the door, she didn't even have time to speak. Ha-joon was there, his silhouette cutting through the dim light of the hallway. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped across the threshold, his movement fluid and predatory. And before she could draw breath to protest, he had his hands on either side of her face. He kissed her. It wasn't the clinical kiss of life from the alleyway, and it wasn't a question. It was a searing, desperate claim. Jennifer's heart didn't just skip a beat. It went into a full ventricular flutter, her body reacting instinctively to the heat and power of the man she had tried so hard to forget. For a heartbeat, her hands hovered near his chest, intending to push, but instead, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Ha-joon pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. His breathing was heavy, his pupils blown wide, mirroring the sympathetic nervous system response of a man in the heat of battle. "This is a proper goodbye, Jennifer," he rasped, his voice vibrating through her very bones. He didn't look like a man who had been rejected. He looked like a man who had simply been given a challenge. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, a lingering touch that felt like a brand. Go back to your city, reach safely. But do not think for 1 second that I am giving up. As you drive tomorrow, as you walk those hospital halls in Seoul, think about me, because I am coming for you. You saved my life, and in my world, that makes you mine. He didn't wait for her to respond. He knew that if she spoke, she would try to be the doctor again, and he didn't want to hear her logic. He turned and walked out into the night, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. Jennifer stood frozen at the door, her lips still tingling, her adrenaline levels off the charts. She looked at her half-packed bags, then out at the empty road leading to the city. She had wanted peace, she had wanted order, and she had wanted her old life back. But as she closed the door and leaned against it, her hand trembling as she touched her lips, she realized the truth. The quiet life she was returning to no longer existed. The king of Seoul had declared war on her solitude, and deep down, in a place no medical textbook could explain, she knew she was already waiting for him to find her. Returning to Seoul was supposed to be the reset Jennifer needed. She was back in her high-tech department at Asan Medical Center, surrounded by the familiar hum of MRI machines and the sterile scent of antiseptic. She had her routine, her colleagues, and her independence. But as the weeks turned into 2 months, it became clear to Jennifer that while she had physically left the village, she had left her peace of mind in that narrow alleyway. In the hospital, Jennifer was known for her laser-like focus and clinical detachment. But lately, her colleagues noticed a glitch in her professional armor. One afternoon, while reviewing the chart of an elderly patient in room 402, Jennifer walked in and said, "Good morning, Mr. Kang. Let's check your vitals." The patient looked at her confused, and her intern cleared his throat. "Dr. Nsubuga." "This is Mr. Choi." Jennifer's face burned. The name Kang Ha-joon was so etched into her mind that it had become her default setting for man. During a high-stakes lunch with the senior surgical board, Jennifer's colleagues were debating a complex aortic dissection case. Jennifer was staring at the steam rising from her coffee. She wasn't seeing the hospital cafeteria. She was feeling the ghost of a hand on her jaw and the weight of a charcoal suit against her skin. Her mind kept replaying that goodbye kiss on a loop. She wasn't. She was lost in the drama she claimed to hate. She realized with a terrifying clarity that her autonomic nervous system was no longer under her control. Whenever she closed her eyes, she didn't see David or her future career. She saw a lion-hearted man who had waited for her in the rain. It was a rainy Tuesday night. Jennifer was in her Seoul apartment, the television humming in the background to drown out the oppressive silence. She was wrapped in an Ugandan throw blanket, trying to focus on a medical documentary, but her eyes kept drifting to the door. Then it happened, a firm, rhythmic knock. Jennifer's heart didn't just beat. It thundered with a sinus tachycardia that made her breath hitch. She didn't check the peephole. She didn't ask, "Who is it?" She swung the door open. There stood Kang Ha-joon. He looked even more stunning than she remembered, his hair slightly damp from the Seoul rain, his black trench coat making him look like a dark god carved from the night itself. He didn't have flowers. He didn't have a speech. He just had that same unblinking, intense gaze that told her he had never truly left her side. For 2 months, Jennifer had practiced what she would say if she ever saw him again. She had prepared a lecture on boundaries, on their different worlds, and on her career. But as she looked at him, all the logic and the doctor persona crumbled. The emotional dam she had built finally burst. She didn't wait for him to speak. She didn't wait for a greeting. Jennifer lunged forward, her feet leaving the floor as she jumped into his arms, wrapping her legs around his waist and burying her face in the crook of his neck. Ha-joon caught her instantly, his powerful arms locking around her like iron bands, his face pressed into her hair. A low, triumphant growl escaped his chest. "I told you," he whispered against her skin, his voice a vibrating force of nature. "I told you I was coming for you." Jennifer didn't pull away. She tightened her grip, her fingers tangling in his damp hair. At that moment, the drama didn't matter. The danger didn't matter. The only thing that made sense to her neurobiology was the man holding her. "You're late," she sobbed into his shoulder, her voice a mix of laughter and tears. "I had to make sure the path was clear," he replied, stepping inside and kicking the door shut behind them, sealing the rest of the world away. Everything had officially changed. The doctor hadn't just saved the Mafia king. She had finally admitted that he was the only one who could save her from the boredom of a life without him. The war was over, and they had both won.